Have you ever asked yourself, can one mistake destroy everything you've built? And if it does, how do you ever live with yourself again? My name is Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. If you had asked me a year ago to describe my life, I would have used words like perfect, stable, and blessed. I had a good job as a graphic designer, a loving family, and a man, Mark, who was everything a woman is told she should want. He was kind, dependable, and he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. Our life together was a beautiful, carefully drawn blueprint for happiness, and our wedding was supposed to be the day we finally broke ground. I remember the relentless focus I had on the details. For months, it was all about the shade of the napkins, not ivory, but champagne, and the exact type of white rose for the bouquets. I thought if I could control every little thing, I could guarantee a perfect outcome. It's funny how we trick ourselves. Mark was a saint through it all. When I'd call him in a panic because the calligrapher used the wrong font on the invitations, he'd just laugh his warm, gentle laugh and say, as long as you're there at the end of the aisle, Sarah, nothing else matters. And I believed him. I really did. I loved Mark. I loved the safety I felt when he held me. I loved how my parents adored him, how my mom would tear up just watching us cook dinner together in the small kitchen of the house we'd just bought. It was a neat, tidy love, one that fit perfectly into the neat, tidy life I was trying to build. But deep down, in a quiet place I never spoke of, there was another feeling. It was the ghost of a different kind of love, a messy, chaotic, all-consuming love I once shared with a man named Leo. Leo was my college boyfriend, my first everything. Our relationship wasn't a blueprint, it was a wildfire. We were passionate and reckless, arguing one minute and clinging to each other the next. He saw the parts of me I kept hidden, the insecure artist, the girl who was afraid she wasn't enough. But he was unreliable, a dreamer with no plan, and eventually, the fire burned out, leaving nothing but smoke and ash. I chose stability. I chose Mark. The wedding day arrived, a crisp, sunny day in October. Everything looked like a photo from a magazine. My dress was beautiful. The church was filled with flowers. And Mark's face when he saw me walking down the aisle was something I'll never forget. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This is it, I thought. This is real. This is my forever. The reception was a blur of champagne, dancing and polite conversations with distant relatives. I was smiling so much my face hurt. But as the night wore on, a strange feeling of detachment began to creep in. I felt like I was watching a movie of my own life instead of actually living it. And then, I saw him. Standing near the back of the room, holding a glass of whiskey was Leo. My heart didn't just drop, it plummeted. He wasn't supposed to be there. We hadn't spoken in years. He caught my eye and gave me a small, sad smile. My breath caught in my throat. A million questions flooded my mind. Why was he here? Who invited him? Mark was across the room, laughing with his groomsmen, completely oblivious. I excused myself and walked towards Leo, my legs feeling like they were moving through water. "What are you doing here?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "I had to see you," he said, his eyes searching mine. "I had to see if you were really happy." The conversation was short, strained. I told him he needed to leave, that he was disrespecting my husband and my marriage. He just nodded, finished his drink, and said, "I hope he knows how lucky he is," before turning and walking out of my life for a second time. But the damage was done. His presence had unearthed all those feelings I had buried so deep. Later that night, in our hotel suite, the feeling of unreality was stronger than ever. Mark was drunk, happy, and clumsy. He kept telling me how much he loved me, but his words felt slurred and distant. We tried to be intimate, but it was awkward. He was too drunk, and my mind was a million miles away. He fell asleep within minutes, snoring softly beside me in our giant, empty bed. I lay there in the dark, wide awake. My beautiful white dress pooled on the floor. I felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness, a profound emptiness that shouldn't exist on your wedding night. And then, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from an unknown number. I'm parked outside. Just need to talk. It was Leo. I knew I shouldn't answer. I should have deleted it, blocked the number, and snuggled up to my new husband. But I didn't. I slipped out of bed, threw on a hotel robe, and went down to meet him, telling myself I just needed closure. I needed to tell him to his face to leave me alone forever. But as I sat there in the passenger seat of his beat-up car, the familiar scent of him filling my lungs, the carefully constructed walls I had built around my heart began to crumble. He spoke of regrets, of the years he wasted, of how he realized too late that I was the one. And I listened. The emptiness I felt in that hotel room was suddenly filled with the ghost of our past. One terrible, life-altering decision led to another, and I went back to his nearby hotel room. The next morning, I woke up tangled in the sheets of my own honeymoon suite, the sun streaming through the windows. Mark was still sleeping beside me, a peaceful smile on his face. But my blood ran cold. The memories of the night before came crashing down on me, suffocating me with shame. I had started my perfect, stable, forever marriage with the ultimate act of betrayal. And as I looked at the man I had just promised my life to, a single, terrifying question burned itself into my mind. How could I possibly live with this secret, and what would happen if it ever came out? The first few weeks of my marriage were a special kind of hell. On the outside, we were the picture of newlywed bliss. We went on our honeymoon to Italy, posted beautiful photos online, and received countless comments about what a perfect couple we were. But inside, I was a wreck. Every time Mark touched me, every time he called me wife, a wave of nausea and guilt would wash over me. I felt like a fraud, an actress playing a part. My internal struggle was a constant buzzing noise in the back of my mind. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake for hours, replaying my wedding night over and over, hating myself for my weakness. I felt like I was drowning in my own secret. Just when I started to hope I could bury that night forever, my phone buzzed. It was Leo. At first, they were simple messages. "Are you okay?" Then they became more insistent. "We need to talk about what happened." "I can't stop thinking about you." Each buzz of my phone sent a spike of pure panic through my chest. I lived in constant fear that Mark would see a message, that he'd ask who I was talking to. I started guarding my phone like it was a live grenade, deleting every message the second I read it. My friend, Jessica, who was my maid of honor, made things worse without even realizing it. "I saw you talking to Leo at the reception," she said over coffee one day. "That was so weird. What did he want?" I mumbled something about him just wanting to offer congratulations and quickly changed the subject, but I could feel her eyes on me, suspicious. The walls were closing in, and every conversation felt like a potential trap. Things started to spiral. My attempts to shut him out only seemed to fuel his determination. He insisted that our night together meant something, that it was proof we were supposed to be together. He was a constant looming threat to the fragile reality I was trying to maintain. He was the embodiment of my mistake, refusing to let me forget. But the constant anxiety over Leo was nothing compared to what happened next. The moment my secret went from being a quiet poison to a ticking time bomb. It was about 6 weeks after the wedding. I started feeling sick in the mornings, tired. My period was late. At first, I dismissed it as stress. I had plenty of that. But when another week passed, I couldn't ignore it anymore. With trembling hands, I took a pregnancy test in the bathroom of a gas station because I couldn't bear to bring it into my own home. 2 pink lines appeared almost instantly. Pregnant. The world tilted on its axis. I should have been happy. Mark and I had talked about wanting kids someday, but this wasn't joy. It was pure, cold terror. The timing was impossible. It was too close. The question wasn't just if I was pregnant, but whose baby it was. The math was a coin toss, a 50-50 chance that could either save me or destroy me completely. What happens now? How do I navigate this? The secret was no longer just about a single night of betrayal. It was about a human life. The next few months were a blur of anxiety. I told Mark I was pregnant, and he was ecstatic. He cried. He held me. He started buying baby books and planning the nursery. His pure joy was like a physical blow, each happy smile a reminder of my deception. The guilt was eating me alive. I felt like a monster, watching this good, kind man celebrate a future that might be built on a devastating lie. I knew I couldn't live with the uncertainty. I had to know the truth, against my better judgment. I contacted Leo and told him I was pregnant and that he might be the father. He was shocked, but then hopeful. He saw it as a sign, a chance for us to be a family. His reaction terrified me. He wanted this to be his child. This complicated everything beyond my worst fears. Getting a prenatal paternity test was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was expensive and secretive. I had to lie to Mark about doctor's appointments, inventing reasons for needing extra checkups. The lies were piling up, each one heavier than the last, and I could feel myself breaking under the weight. The day the clinic called to say the results were ready, a cold dread settled deep in my bones. I drove to the park where Mark had proposed, a place once filled with promise, and just sat in my car, holding the sealed white envelope. I just stared at it for what felt like hours. In that moment, I felt completely and utterly hopeless. It didn't matter what the paper said. If the baby was Mark's, I would have to live the rest of my life with my secret, a lie at the very foundation of our family. And if it was Leo's, everything would be over. There was no good outcome. My life, the one I had so carefully planned, was already gone. I had burned it to the ground on my wedding night. With tears streaming down my face, my hands shaking so badly I could barely do it, I tore open the envelope. I scanned the technical jargon until my eyes landed on the one sentence that mattered: probability of paternity. 9.9%. The father was Leo. I dropped the paper on the passenger seat and just broke down, sobbing. Not quiet tears, but gut-wrenching, soul-shattering sobs. It was over. All of it. The perfect house, the loving husband, the happy future I'd thought I wanted. It was all a lie, and the proof was right there on a piece of paper in my trembling hands. I had lost everything, and it was no one's fault but my own. Sitting in that car, with the truth laid bare on the seat beside me, I knew I had run out of road. There were no more lies I could tell, no more corners I could cut. The secret had become a living thing, and it was about to have a name and a face, To bring a child into the world on a foundation of such a profound lie felt like the cruelest act of all, both to the baby and to Mark. He deserved the truth. He deserved to know what I had done and to make his own choice, free from my deception. That night, I waited for him to come home from work. The house was silent, except for the frantic beating of my own heart. I rehearsed the words in my head 100 times, but none of them seemed right. How do you tell your husband that you're carrying another man's child? When he walked in, he was smiling. He'd brought me a small bouquet of daisies, my favorite. For my two favorite people, he said, kissing my cheek and placing a hand on my still flat stomach. That simple, loving gesture shattered what little composure I had left. "Mark," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "we need to talk." We sat down on the couch, the daisies lying on the coffee table between us like a cruel joke. I couldn't look him in the eye. I stared at my hands as I started to speak, the words tumbling out in a broken, tear-filled confession. I told him everything. About Leo showing up at the wedding, about how lost and lonely I felt that night, about the text, the car, and the hotel room. I watched as his face went through a storm of emotions, confusion, then disbelief, then a dawning, gut-wrenching horror. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of such profound hurt that it felt like a physical wound. When I finally got to the part about the pregnancy, about the paternity test, he just went still. He stared at me, his eyes empty. The silence in that room was the loudest thing I have ever heard. "Get out," he finally said. His voice wasn't loud or angry. It was quiet, dead, and utterly devoid of the warmth I had known for years. "Mark, please," I started, but he cut me off. "Get out of my house." And that was it. The main conflict, the secret that had been poisoning my life for months, was resolved in that one hollow command. There was no screaming match, no throwing of plates, just the quiet, brutal end of our life together. I packed a small bag, my hands shaking, and left the home we had built together. I left the daisies on the table. I moved into a small, temporary apartment, and the days that followed were a blur of divorce proceedings and heartbreaking conversations with our families. Telling my parents was almost as hard as telling Mark. The disappointment in their eyes was a heavy burden to carry. The central question I had asked myself that morning after my wedding night: will my one terrible mistake destroy everything I've built, and can I ever find a way to live with myself, now had its answer. Yes, my mistake had destroyed everything: the perfect life, the loving marriage, the trust and respect of the man I had promised to honor. It was all gone, reduced to ash. But in the smoldering ruins of that life, the second part of the question began to find its answer. The path to living with myself wasn't through hiding or pretending. It was through this. It was through facing the consequences, no matter how painful. By telling the truth, I had finally stopped running. I had accepted the price for my actions. The destruction was absolute, but for the first time in months, I wasn't hiding. The burden of the lie was gone, replaced by the heavy reality of the truth. It was a terrible, painful trade, but it was a start. It's been 2 years now. My daughter, Lily, just celebrated her first birthday. She has Leo's bright, curious eyes and my smile. We live in a small, 2-bedroom apartment that's often messy and filled with the happy chaos of a toddler. It is nothing like the pristine, quiet house I once shared with Mark. It's not the life I ever would have planned, but it's real. It's mine. Looking back, It's easy to see the girl I was as a fool, and in many ways, she was. I spent so much energy trying to build a perfect life, like I was following a set of instructions from a magazine. I wanted the perfect husband, the perfect house, the perfect future. I saw Mark not just as a man I loved, but as the final, most important piece of that perfect picture. I convinced myself that loving the idea of a life with him was the same as truly loving him, in all his depths. But that one catastrophic mistake on my wedding night forced me to look at the truth. It wasn't about Leo. Not really. He was just a symbol of the unresolved parts of myself I had tried to bury. He represented a passion and an uncertainty that I was terrified of, so I ran towards Mark's stability. My betrayal wasn't just a betrayal of Mark, it was a betrayal of myself. I had silenced my own doubts and insecurities for so long that they erupted in the most destructive way possible. The lesson I learned wasn't simple. It wasn't just don't cheat on your husband. It was deeper than that. I learned that you cannot build a life on a foundation of fear. I was afraid of being messy, of being uncertain, of not having a clear path. Mark represented a safe harbor, and I clung to it so tightly that I never learned how to swim on my own. The price I paid was immense. I lost a good man. I hurt him in a way that I will regret for the rest of my life. I carry the shame of my actions every single day. But what did I gain? I gained myself. I was forced to stand on my own 2 feet, not as a wife or a partner, but just as Sarah. As a mother, I learned to confront my own flaws, to take responsibility for my ugliest choices, and to build something new from the wreckage. My life isn't perfect anymore. It's complicated, and it's hard. Leo is in Lily's life, and we are navigating a co-parenting relationship that is often awkward and difficult, but it's an honest life. There are no more secrets suffocating me in my sleep. My transformation wasn't a beautiful, cinematic glow-up. It was a painful, tear-soaked stripping away of everything I thought I was, until all that was left was the raw, flawed, but finally authentic version of me. I am no longer a girl trying to color inside the lines of a life someone else drew for her. I am a woman drawing her own lines, day by day, even when my hand is shaking. And in that, I have found a strange, unexpected peace. So, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt trapped between the life everyone expected you to want and the person you secretly knew you were? What did it take for you to finally choose your own path? Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would genuinely love to read your thoughts on that question in the comments below. This is a safe space, and sharing our experiences is how we remind each other that we're not alone. If this story resonated with you or made you feel something, giving this video a like would mean the world to me. It really helps the story reach others who might need to hear it. And finally, if you connect with this kind of storytelling and want to be part of our community, please subscribe to the channel. I'd be honored to share my next story with you.